Welcome to The Explainer. So you flip on the news and an anchor dramatically announces, oil has just hit $100 a barrel. And you're probably sitting there wondering, okay, but what does that actually mean for me? We hear this phrase, $100 a barrel, constantly, right? But figuring out what that number really dictates when you're standing there shivering at the local gas pump, well, that's a whole different story. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand those changing numbers on your gas station sign, we first have to wrap our heads around the physical reality behind this abstract headline number. When we say a barrel of oil, we aren't just using some vague figure of speech or a fancy financial metric. It's a real, physical thing.
Let's actually rewind all the way back to the 1860s oil boom in Pennsylvania. Back then, producers literally used old wooden barrels, and get this, they were often repurposed whiskey barrels, just to store and transport the crude oil. Thankfully, they eventually swapped out the whiskey for standardized 42-gallon measurements, so the wooden barrels, long gone, but that 42-gallon metric, it stuck around completely. It's kind of crazy to think about, right?
So the absolutely crucial point here is that one single 42-gallon barrel punches way above its weight. While gasoline definitely makes up the biggest single slice of the pie, it is far from the only product. That very same barrel yields other fuels, like diesel, jet fuel, and heating oil. And it doesn't even stop at fuels. It provides the raw building blocks for plastics, fertilizers, everyday chemicals, the whole shebang. So when we talk about oil prices, we really aren't just talking about gasoline. We're talking about the cost of a massive, interconnected system of products that literally touches almost every single part of our modern lives.
So here's our agenda for today's Explainer. 1. Anatomy of a barrel. 2. Who sets the price? 3. The import-export paradox. 4. From crude to the pump. And finally 5. The global ripple effect. Basically, we're taking a journey from the physical barrel to the global market, right down to your wallet.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Anatomy of a Barrel, and the sheer scale of consumption.
Before we even look at prices, we have to grasp the mind-boggling scale of our global thirst for this stuff. The world consumes about 104 million barrels every single day. And out of that, the United States uses roughly 21 million barrels daily. Zoom out a bit and you're looking at 7.5 billion barrels a year just in the US. But here's what's truly surprising. US oil consumption has actually remained relatively steady for decades, even as our economy and our population have totally skyrocketed over that same time.
But while our consumption has been remarkably steady, the price we pay? Oh, absolutely not steady at all. Prices move wildly, and they're intimately tied to major global shocks. We've seen massive price spikes during the Iranian Revolution, dramatic, crazy swings during the 2008 financial crisis when demand just completely plummeted, another collapse during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, and most recently, geopolitical tensions involving Iran driving the largest price spike since 2022. So yeah, our steady habits at home absolutely do not protect us from a turbulent world.
Moving right along to Section 2. Who sets the price? The invisible market.
You see, there's no single person just sitting in a smoky back room setting prices. The price is actually determined by traders on these massive global exchanges like NYMEX and ICE. You can think of these exchanges like giant, invisible marketplaces where buyers and sellers meet up. But, and this is key, they aren't physically swapping those 42-gallon whiskey barrels we talked about earlier. No, they're trading what are called futures contracts. These are simply agreements to buy or sell oil at a set price at a set time in the future. They're essentially trading paper oil. And it's these millions of paper trades that actually dictate the benchmark prices you hear reported on the evening news.
And when you're checking the news, you're usually going to hear about two major benchmark prices. First up is WTI, or West Texas Intermediate. That's the main reference price for the U.S. market. On the flip side, we have Brent crude, which serves as the global benchmark. Together, these two reference prices help set the baseline value of oil worldwide. And just to give you an idea of how volatile this paper market can be, Brent crude alone has violently swung from under $20 a barrel to well over $100 a barrel over time. No way around it. It is a total roller coaster.
Which brings us to Section 3, the import-export paradox, or U.S. oil on the global stage.
We really have to address the elephant in the room here. If the U.S. is such a top producer, why on earth are we still so tied to global prices? And why are we still importing petroleum? Well, to understand this, you got to look at the history. Between 1975 and the end of 2015, Congress actually enforced a ban on nearly all exports of U.S. crude oil. For a long time, honestly, this wasn't a huge deal because we just didn't produce that much oil anyway. But then, thanks to some major advancements in drilling technologies, U.S. crude oil production roughly doubled between 2009 and 2015. We suddenly had this massive surge, and that prompted Congress to finally repeal this 40-year-old export ban, allowing us to freely sell U.S. crude worldwide.
And this brilliantly illustrates the paradox we're in today. Why do we heavily export and import at the exact same time? Simple. Because not all oil is the same. The United States pulls a massive amount of light crude out of the ground, but many of our major domestic refineries were designed decades ago to process heavy crude, which, you guessed it, is exactly what we have to import. Plus, at the end of the day, U.S. producers are simply going to sell their oil wherever global prices are the highest. So whether it's imported or exported, all of it, the whole supply, is priced on a global scale.
All right, Section 4, from crude to the pump. Let's look at the hidden costs. Let's pivot back to you, the consumer. We've all wondered why a sudden drop in crude oil doesn't instantly equal super cheap gas at your local station, right? Well, the absolutely crucial point is this. Only about 50% of what you pay at the pump is actually tied to the price of raw crude oil. That raw commodity is quite literally only half the story of what's driving the price on that big glowing sign at your corner gas station.
It's a complex journey, and it reveals all the hidden costs involved in turning that global barrel into your gasoline. Step 1 is, of course, the raw crude oil itself, but then comes Step 2, refining capacity. You have to actually pay to turn that sludgy crude into usable fuel. Then Step 3 adds transportation and logistics costs, getting the fuel loaded into trucks and pumped through pipelines across the country. And finally, Step 4 factors in state and local regulations, fuel standards, and even seasonal demand. And that right there is exactly why gas prices can sometimes creep up, even when the price of crude oil barely moves an inch.
And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, the global ripple effect, exploring choke points and wallets.
To truly understand what you pay at the pump, we have to zoom way out to a critical geopolitical reality located 5,000 miles away, the Strait of Hormuz. It's this incredibly narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean, and it is arguably one of the most important choke points in the entire world. Get this, an astounding 20 million barrels of oil are expected to pass through that single, narrow strait every single day in 2025. Now, just to put that 20 million into perspective, that is roughly 1/5 of the entire planet's global oil consumption, squeezing through one waterway. And here is the real kicker. Most of that oil doesn't even come to the United States. It goes primarily to Asia. But remember what we've learned throughout this explainer. Oil is a global market. If the supply of that 1/5 of global oil is threatened in the Strait of Hormuz, global prices rise everywhere, and that directly hits your wallet at your local gas station. Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative thought to consider. Is your local gas station just a convenient retail shop, or is it actually the final stop in a fragile, highly interconnected global network? The next time you hear that oil is $80 or $100 a barrel, you'll know it's not just some random number pulled out of thin air. It is a massive, complex, physical system shaped by infrastructure, trading markets, and world events 5,000 miles away. Thank you so much for diving into this explainer with me. Keep asking those great questions, and I will catch you next time.